Welcome, everybody. Hello, hello. Welcome. Lovely to see you. Lovely to see some people back for another webinar. I see a few familiar faces, people who've joined us for other sessions this week and previous sessions. Just going to let everyone in from the waiting room and just take a couple of minutes to do that. I always like to see whether we have any neighbours on these calls. So do introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know what organization you're from. Let us know where you are in the world. Let's see whether we have any neighbours. We've got Flora here today who's going to be talking us through this session. Give us a wave, Flora. And we've got Neil here from Charity People who are our sponsors. I'm going to hand over to Neil in a sec and I'll do a brief introduction to Fair Collective for those of you who are not familiar with our work. Flora, could I ask you to let people in from the waiting room as I'm talking? I'm trying my best to multitask, but it would be great to have your help on that if anybody's coming in the next minute or so. So welcome everybody. My name's Vic Hancock-Fell. I'm the founder and director here at Fair Collective. We're really grateful for your time today. We know that time is one of your most precious resources. Really appreciative of you giving us your time, especially on a Friday afternoon at the end of what I'm sure has been a busy week. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Fair Collective, we are a social enterprise, a not-for-profit organisation, and we matchmake social good organisations, mostly charity clients, but also working with universities, other not-for-profit structures. We matchmake those social good organisations with talented and specialist freelancers and consultants. These are some of our lovely clients that we've worked with. We've worked with tiny grassroots volunteer-run charities all the way through to larger national and international organisations as well. Flora, can you go on to the next one for me? Thank you. So we're essentially a matchmaker. We have an associate pool of over 100 talented freelancers and consultants, of which Flora is one. And we've got skills ranging from grant writing through to co-production, DEI, anti-racist practice, partnerships, comms, web design, CRMs. I think we pretty much have someone for everything. It's a free service for clients, so we don't charge you for finding you a match. Our business model works by our associates paying a referral fee for the work that they receive through Fair Collective. We do day rates by organisation income level, and we donate at least 50% of our profits to the small charity sector through providing free things like this and through delivering pro bono work to small organisations. I'm going to stop talking now. I want to say a massive thank you to Charity People who are kindly sponsoring today's webinar. It really helps us to have this support to help us keep our work, the free content that we do, to keep that free for all of you. And as a small organisation and a not-for-profit ourselves, we're really grateful for sponsorship like this. So thanks, Neil. And I'll hand over to you to say a few words about Charity People for those who don't know you.
Thanks, Vic. And it's a pleasure to be here today and to sponsor this event. So my name's Neil Hogan. I'm one of the directors at Charity People. We're a recruitment company that was founded in 1990 with a grant from the Prince's Trust. So essentially, we were actually born out of the charity sector itself. We specialise in recruiting roles for charities, membership bodies, and education institutions across the whole of the UK. The specialist areas that we cover include fundraising, operations, marcoms, data, HR, and leadership positions. Many of our consultants, including myself, have also worked in the charity sector in one form or another. I'm actually coming up on my anniversary at Charity People. Next year, I'll have been with the organisation for 15 years. And it's been great to see it go through a massive journey in that period of time. We have really good retention with our staff. I think between myself, the MD, our operations manager and our finance manager, just 4 positions, we've covered around about 65 years of working at the company. We became employee owned in 2023. And so we're now currently coming up on 2 years into that incredible journey. We operate in a similar way to John Lewis or Richer Sounds, where all employees who work at Charity People have a voice within the company, and they also have access to a share of the profit. We also are very proudly B Corp certified. We were certified in 2024, and we are especially proud that during our accreditation, we were the highest scoring recruitment company in the whole world with a B Corp score of 138.8 points. This means that we always aim to uphold the highest standards of social and environmental responsibility. We're champions of equity, diversity, and inclusion, and we ensure that every recruitment process is fair, accessible, and designed to attract a wide range of talented candidates. If anyone in the audience feels that Charity People might be able to assist them in any way, we'd love to hear from you. So please do get in touch, and you can reach us or find us at www.charitypeople.co.uk. Thanks very much, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Vic. I'm going to pass over to Flora now, who will continue.
Great. Thank you so much, Neil. And once again, a huge thank you to you for sponsoring today's webinar. It's wonderful to have so many of you joining and so many trickling in. Good to see some familiar names and faces as well. So to introduce myself, I'm Flora Fye, and I'm a small charity coach, trainer, and consultant. And I really specialize in helping small charities have a huge impact. And as a bit of background to myself, I have over 10 years of experience of actually running small charities as well. I've only ever worked in small charities, so it's sort of live and breathe it every day. So today's session, we're going to be exploring how to stay steady in the storm and how to focus a bit on ourselves and how we set ourselves and our teams up for success, even when it feels like everything's swirling around us. And to start off, I'd love to do a bit of a poll. If Vic, I can invite you to get that ready. This is just to check in with all of you to see how you're feeling as a leader. So there are no right or wrong answers. Just pick what you feel on there at the moment. And if we can go, I'm mostly firefighting or reacting, I'm surviving but feeling stretched, I'm trying to plan ahead but struggling, I feel confident in balancing short and long-term leadership, or if other, please do put it in the chat if you feel comfortable.
The poll's
Wonderful.
up now. I'll end it in 10 seconds or so, and then I can share the results.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Vic.
Okay, I can see the results starting to come through. Just give you another 5 seconds, then we'll end that poll and we can have a look at the results. Okay, can you see those results up on your screen? Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. And it's good to see sort of the spread across it. And thank you so much for sharing and for feeling comfortable in sharing this for us. We'll really be touching in on all of those aspects as we go along around how we come together. But hopefully this has helped you see that you're not alone in how you're feeling. A lot of us are in that firefighting, trying to plan, but feeling a bit stretched and struggling. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start exploring how we can lead even within a crisis, the patterns we fall into, the pressures we put on ourselves, why it can feel so overwhelming. Then we'll look at what we can do even in the middle of uncertainty to create space and calm for ourselves. We'll talk about how we can take small but intentional steps to reduce that pressure and increase clarity for ourselves and for our teams. We'll talk about how we can also then stay rooted in our values, even under pressure, so that you're leading in a way that you feel proud of. And then we'll finish off with a final reflection poll and a quick Q&A at the end. And with all of this today, I just want to ground it in, these are suggestions, ideas for you to try. I don't want it to feel like yet another thing that you're adding to your to-do list. So take what feels like something you can do, find those little steps that you can build in, and use that to then build more space and create more time for yourselves. So this is very much coming to you from a support rather than an expectation point of view. So let's start with what leadership in a crisis often looks like when we're feeling in the middle of the storm. And I use this image from ChatGPT to kind of try and capture how I often felt, feeling like I'm in the boat, there's holes everywhere, I'm trying to bail out, more rain is coming, and it's just feeling a little bit overwhelming. So often it feels like the default is that we're always in reaction mode. So there's new funding pressures, teams are asking for things, or issues are coming up, there's concerns from trustees, complaints or queries come in. And we just feel like there's just more and more holes springing up in the boat, and that we're jumping from task to task, trying to plug leaks as they appear. And we just stop reflecting, we stop steering, and all we're doing is just in that survival mode of just bailing water out to stay afloat. And all too often, we end up feeling like we're also the only one in the boat. So even if we have a team around us, volunteers, trustees, team members even, it feels like we're the only ones who are really looking after this. And this is firstly completely understandable, especially in a small team. You might be the only one who knows these aspects of the charity. You know it inside and out, and it feels like this is your role to just keep doing this. And it can then end up into a little bit of a spiral, which I've created recently in a blog post on Fair Collective, of starting to feel like we're just going down and down in setting very high expectations, feeling like we have to know all the answers, fix every problem, keep everything going. But then we get into this mindset of this is how it should be. And if it's not like that, then we start criticizing, we start telling ourselves we're not good enough, we start second guessing, we overwhelm ourselves. And it just keeps going into this spiral down into, frankly, exhaustion and burnout. And in this mode, we just start believing some really powerful and damaging things like there's no time to stop. If I slow down, we sink. I just need to get through this one thing and then I'll take stock. And the problem with that mindset is that it's never just one thing. There's always things happening around us. Another unexpected challenge comes on, and the storm kind of keeps raging on, and we stay stuck in this reactive cycle where it's just one more thing, it's just one more thing, and then over time it becomes our default leadership style. And so today I just want to very gently challenge that, and kind of remind ourselves and give us the space to start to think that even if it feels like that storm is going to sink the boat, we still have choices on how we react to that and how we respond to that. And that those choices, no matter how small, are where our leadership really comes to life and where we can bring everyone together in our team. So how do we start to react even when the pressure is real and the demands are constant? And the first thing that I think is really important for us to internalize is that it's to create a sense of calm. And I've come across, especially in my coaching, where calm feels like it's a luxury, that's like something for someone else, like it's something for a big charity only. And it's really not. Calm is a strategic tool that we can all start to create in creating a space for ourselves to be able to think and respond and make the decisions that we feel are intentional for us. And this is where we can really start to lead with intention and to move away from a lot of the pressures which obviously come from outside, but don't necessarily reflect the pressures that we also then put on ourselves from the inside. So some of these pressures, perfectionism, the belief that everything must be done and done flawlessly, the isolation that we can start to create for ourselves where we feel like we're the only staff member and that's responsible for these things, feeling like we are overloading everything, we're trying to save it from everyone else and make sure that we're the only ones looking after it, and lack of reflection of not taking any time to ask what's working or what feels wrong or what needs to change. And so these are those internal pressures that we can have control over even when the outside pressures are building up, so that we can take that pause, we can step away and create that calm as an active decision rather than a passive thing that we hope will come when external pressures go away. So with all that said and done, how do we actually start creating the calm? And I just noticed the question in the chat. The slides will be shared afterwards, and I believe there's a recording as well that will be shared. Looking at Vic, who's nodding, which is great. So let's get into how to create that sense of calm and make that intentional shift internally towards that strategic calm. And the first step is very much protecting that time for pause and reflection. And so this is something that, depending on what is happening around you, it can be something you do in a second, it can be something you carve out time for longer term. But the first thing I would suggest is any moment where you feel like you've just been hit by an external wave of pressure, it's taking that very simple first step to just take a couple of breaths. And this has been shown psychologically that when we're in a stressful situation or emotionally triggering situation, we are hit by the sort of chemical reaction in our brains of that emotion happening. And it takes about 90 seconds for that wave of emotion to hit us and to start to pass. And so having that pause, and I know it always sounds very simple, but genuinely taking a few breaths, creating the space for yourself to let that 90 seconds pass, means that you can move from trigger to reaction to trigger, circuit breaker of a few breaths, and then an intentional response that you want to take forward. So in the moment, it can often feel like we don't even have 90 seconds. So the ways you can start to create that pause is, instead of immediately taking action, is to ask a couple of questions instead. So someone's come at you going, oh my God, this thing is happening. Then go, okay, tell me more. What's happened? Who's been involved in this? What are you thinking? Giving yourself that space to throw the question back to the other person. Or if it's an email, to just get up, step away for that 90 seconds to breathe. It means that you can then ride out that emotion, come back into intention for yourself, and then decide what you want to do. If you are dealing with this sort of more broad scale on a weekly scale, then what I'd suggest is scheduling in 15 minutes, either at the start of a week or at the end of the week, to have that reflection. So block it out in your calendar to say, okay, these are all the things swirling around me. What are my real priorities? What do I need to make space for this week? In coaching sessions, sometimes clients have found it really helpful to imagine that they're at the end of the week and they write a little list of what I will have achieved this week. And writing that out then means that they have that intention. They've set a goal that feels achievable. And then it doesn't feel like just this endless to-do list that you're constantly trying to tick off, but then only seeing what hasn't been done. You're getting into that mindset of what have I done? What have I achieved? And then you feel really good when you get to the end of the week and even if you've only done one bit of it, you've got that sense of you're focusing on achievement rather than what's missing. And then scaling out even further onto a monthly level, this is where I would suggest scheduling in like an hour in your calendar, and it really doesn't need to be longer than that. But again, putting in an hour at some point in the month to check in and go, what's gone well this month? What have I achieved? What have I learned from that? What do I want to carry forward into the next month? And my favorite question, which I always hate answering, but I find is the most useful one, is what am I avoiding? And this is often the big things that we know we really should be looking at, but it's unpleasant, so we're not doing it. But actually, that's the stuff that can spiral and end up being the firefighting that we're doing during the month. So intentionally bringing that forward and thinking, what am I avoiding? Okay, is there a small thing I can do towards that this month? So at least I'm managing it or staying on top of it rather than letting it get worse. And building in this, and hopefully it feels feasible, in the moment, 90 seconds, on a weekly basis, 15 minutes, and on a monthly basis, an hour if you can spare. Even just half an hour if an hour is too long, can just start to create that calm, create that space where it doesn't feel like everything's spinning around you, and you start to bring that intentionality in yourself. And it builds in that habit of pausing, thinking, then acting. The next thing I'd recommend is to think about actually defining what good enough looks like. And what we often end up doing is we get this idea of this is where I want to be. And it becomes this fixed goalpost, we think, of as long as I do that, it'll be great. But because we never define what that is, it's just, oh, well, I need to get more funding. Okay. What does that look like? You might have gotten a lot of funding, but you then think, oh, but it's not enough. So I should have gotten more, and I should have gotten more, and why am I doing better? And again, we get in that spiral because as we achieve things, we start to move the goalposts. Very actively at the start of your reflection, defining what good enough for that activity looks like means that you can build over time. So you can say, right, good enough for this week is taking a step in this direction. The next week, good enough will be taking that further step. Or we can try and get £300, and then next week we can try, if we build on it, that might be too short a timeline for that example. But it just breaks things down, and it makes you realize when you have achieved something. Because again, we're in crisis mode. We really lose perspective on how much we've done. And defining that good enough means that you have a definitive thing where you can say, yes, I've actually done what I wanted to do. Brilliant. I can now move on to the next step, but I can celebrate and be happy with my success for this week. The next step is more of a cultural aspect within the team, and it's about creating psychological safety. And psychological safety, just at its core, is an environment where everyone feels safe enough to speak up, so to admit mistakes, to ask questions, to challenge ideas, and most importantly, to just say, I don't know, without the fear of being embarrassed or punished or undermined for saying those things. And this is one of the strongest predictors of a high-performing team. So if this is in place, it means people feel safe enough to take ownership of activities, to solve problems collaboratively, to give feedback, to hear feedback. And the value, obviously, to your team is that they then feel like they can step up and get involved in things that maybe are at the limit of their skills and ask for help to improve. But personally, the really valuable thing is that you can then say, I don't know, and you can admit that you don't need to know all the answers to everything and be able to fix everything, which then gives you the space to ask for help, so that if you have paid staff members, then you can ask for them. If you have volunteers, draw on them, draw on trustees, even draw on external partners, because you recognize it's safe to admit that and you don't have to hold it all by yourself. And then the fourth thing I recommend in creating the sort of strategic calm is to acknowledge your trade-offs. So it's really important for us to recognize that every time we say yes to something, we are saying no to at least one other thing. We have limited time, limited resources, and by being very open and honest about trade-offs, it means that you can draw in your team and draw in the people around you to help make decisions about what we're prioritizing and to do that strategically. So if a team member has come and said, I've got this amazing idea, or this really big thing is happening that's worrying me, we can go, right, if we're going to address that now, then we actively acknowledge and accept we're not going to do these 5 other things, and we're okay with that. And again, it creates that pause so that we don't feel like, oh my God, this is another thing on my plate. As we put things on our plate, we are taking it off and intentionally accepting that that's coming off. We can then communicate that with whoever needs to know. We can manage expectations. And so it doesn't feel like we're constantly trying to spin the plates. We can put them down and just focus on what we need to. So hopefully at least one of those feels feasible for building into your practice. They're all things that you don't need to have 20 extra people to do. It's little ways to create that intentional slowing down and consideration of what you want to do, so that you can actually just have that courage to put out those fires and get on with what you want to focus on. So I'm just going to pause there for a moment to check in with everyone. How is that landing with you? If there was one of those that you could take forward to create space, what's aligning with what you're feeling and where you are at the moment? So please do pop it in the chat. just for a couple of moments. Or if anyone feels brave enough and is comfortable enough to come off mute, you're very welcome to come off as well. Yeah, I'm seeing pauses, acknowledging trade-offs, scheduling reflection time. Anyone feeling anything would be difficult to build into your schedule? Yeah, the trade-off seems to be to linking to people. Yes, and especially around with trustees, it's a really good way of managing that expectation of if they just keep piling things on, then go, brilliant, I can do that, but this is what I'm not going to do. Are you comfortable with that? I've noticed something from Simon. I'm not quite sure I follow. I don't know if you're comfortable coming off mute to share your idea, or do you want to just add more in the chat either way?
Yeah, no, I don't mind. Maybe I've kind of got it slightly wrong, but it was just, I think one of the sort of, there's the contextual drivers of all of this is just the lack of continuity and funding. I don't know this is like a systemic issue, but it's the background noise, isn't it? That amongst all the other stuff that people aren't certain about their work futures. So that puts stress on them. And then as employers, you're trying to like protect them from that, bridge gaps, retain good people, and you can't begrudge them moving on when they're offered something more stable. So I think it's one of those things that like it's background noise to all the other stress, isn't it? Really for them and for you if you're leading.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is definitely one of those external pressures that it's more of a systemic problem, as you were saying, and an issue with how our funding system is set up. And I know that's something Fair Collective and Vic particularly talks a lot about publicly to try and change that, shift that with funders. But that is something that it's one that in creating the relationship with the team, some of these tools can come in around how you manage those expectations with the team members, how you communicate to them, as you have just said, how much you value them and what you are trying to do, but recognizing the trade-offs of the environment that we're operating in so they are able to make decisions themselves. I'm completely without context seeing someone write not really killing my team as a thing that they're trying to build in. So I'll catch up on the chat to see where that's come from. But I will, just conscious of time, so I'll move us on, but please do keep putting things in the chat and sharing and reacting to each other, especially where there are some funny comments coming in. So far, we've kind of looked at what crisis leadership can look like and how to create those small pockets of calm. But what I want to start to help us bring in is how we can start to look beyond the current situation and start moving in the direction that we want so that we're kind of steering through the storm, even responding to it. And so when we're in times of uncertainty and there's a lot of things shifting around us, it can feel really easy to get frozen in that unknown and kind of feel adrift of not really sure where you're going because there's so many things around us that are unknown. And so an analogy that I've found really helpful, and I often bring up in my coaching sessions, is around the telescope microscope mindset. And so the way this comes together is, so the telescope is where we set our long-term vision, and this is kind of our North Star. We all do this for the organization as a whole as part of our strategic vision, but this is more a sense for yourself and for your team of where you would like to get to. So what are we moving towards? What does our mission tell us about how we want to show up right now? And this is so that there is a broad, again, that sense of what's good enough looking like month's time, in a year's time. Where would we like to get with our beneficiaries? What is that state we would like to be in? And having that as our telescope and always keeping an eye looking towards that future. So we have a direction that we're moving towards. But then bringing in the microscope, which is where we kind of zoom in on the very immediate actionable steps that we can take. So that's sort of asking yourself, what is one thing we can do this week that starts to align us in that sense of direction. And having these two sort of lenses, I guess is the best way to put it, helps us stay on track, but allows us to respond meaningfully in the moment as well. And the benefit of having that telescope, even in uncertainty, having that sense of this is the state we're trying to get to, is that it moves you away again from a very definitive list of these are the things we have to absolutely do. We have to tick all of these things off our to-do list. These are the only things we can do, which can get us very sort of focused in and boxed in our perspective. Having that telescope means that we have that sense of direction, and when unexpected opportunities come up, it gives you a very good steer of saying, can we say yes to that? Is that helping us move in that direction? If not, then we are appreciative, we thank you, but we say no, because we have to focus our limited resources on going in that direction. And it opens up that creativity as well of, rather than having just that to-do list, having that definition of what good looks like that we're moving towards means that when something very creative or unusual comes up, we might say yes to it because it might be something we've not done before, but actually we see that how that's contributing and leading us towards that path. The other thing that I think we often overlook in the charity sector is the power of experimenting and doing small little attempts at things rather than making very big shifts. And the benefit of doing these little experiments is that it can give us that sense of clear sense of what's working. It can let us try out the creative ideas in small contained efforts and let us see, you know, does this actually meaningfully shift us at all? Yes, brilliant, then we can invest a bit more time into it. Or, okay, let's row back from that, that's not working for us. And it gives us a reason to reflect regularly, because if we're doing small experiments, if we're trying stuff out, then we have to keep talking as a team to go, okay, what went well? What didn't go well? What have we learned from this? Okay, even if this didn't end up working, what have we taken away from that that we can then try or apply to a different situation? And overall, collectively, this shifts us as a team, as a culture, away from we have to get this right, which often ends up in that sort of spiral to exhaustion of trying to aim for that perfect outcome and that perfect impact, to let's see what we can learn, let's see where we can get to. And it creates that sense of continuous improvement within the team so that we take a little bit of pressure off and we recognize things that have gone astray more as learning opportunities and less as mistakes and things that we then beat ourselves up over. The third aspect that I really recommend bringing in sort of navigating out of chaos and managing uncertainty is around scenario planning. And this often is presented, especially in sort of business schools, as this big activity that, you know, we have to invest months into planning out our scenarios, and then they just end up on a shelf and aren't really meaningful for anything. And taking it more into a daily activity of scenario planning and moving away from it being an act of fear of, oh gosh, what if this goes wrong, into more of an act of hope of what could happen, how could we move forward with this? And so by sketching out small what ifs, what if we do this, what could happen questions, we start to move again away from the trigger reaction to trigger pause, how does this align to our scenarios, and then intentional reaction to a situation. And so all I suggest is taking, you know, maybe 10 to 15 minutes when making a big decision as a team to ask these 3 questions of yourself. So what's the best case scenario? What could happen if we do this? What's the worst case scenario? And within that conversation, what is actually most likely from our experience that might come out of this? And once you've had that conversation, asking the final question, what is one thing we can do to prepare for that? And keeping it, again, if you have much more time, brilliant, go into more detail. But if you are very time stretched, then that sort of 10 to 15 minute conversation around this, and always bringing it back to, okay, what are actions we can do helps everyone actually feel quite empowered, because it feels like something we are reacting and responding to appropriately. It creates a sense of calm if anything does go wrong, because rather than it being a panicked response, it's a, right, we have actually thought about this. What happens might be completely different from what we prepared for, but we've already kind of somewhat emotionally prepared for something going wrong. And so again, we can react more calmly, more intentionally in what we're going to do. And some of the things you've prepared for other scenarios may also set you up for reacting to whatever it is that actually ends up happening. And the benefit of scenario planning as well, which I think we often overlook, is the psychological aspect of, there's an assumption within scenario planning that we are planning to survive this. And this is hugely morale boosting if everyone is coming together and going, right, things might go wrong, but we will get through it together, and we are already actively thinking about how we're going to get there. And it really unleashes a lot of creativity, which in times of pressure often is one of the first things that we shut down. And then a final thing to think about is how you also then enable your team to be more involved. So again, it doesn't feel like you're the only one who's carrying everything. And I've written a longer article about this on the Fair Collective blog, so just signposting that for much more detail. But just for today, I wanted to explore around how you can start to set up your team for success. And this is all about how you help them move forward so that they can start taking on some of that load, shouldering, stepping alongside you and being that team with you, rather than just looking to you to fix everything. And I absolutely love this matrix. I think it really helps. It's a really simple way of, as a manager, deciding how you respond to something in the situation with your team member. So if I talk you through it, so the x-axis is competence. So this is the skill level someone has. So on the left side, we've got low, and on the right side, we've got high. And then on the y-axis, we've got confidence. So again, at the top, it's high, at the bottom, it's low. And this helps you decide, when you've had a team member come to you, when you're thinking about handing something over to a team member, when you think about delegating, this can help you decide how's the best way to do it. So if someone has low competence, so low skill, low level of experience maybe, and their confidence is also quite low, the best response there to set them up for success is to be very directive in telling them what you need, what you're expecting from them, how to approach it, and really giving them all the instructions they need to be able to do the thing that you've asked them, the thing that you've handed over. And hopefully within this, the extra dimension to be recognized is obviously that will be time intensive for you. So this is where, if someone is in that low competence and low confidence point of view, that might be where you're thinking about, okay, can we get them some training, free or low cost training, to upskill them to be able to do this? Or I need to carve out a lot more time in my diary to actually be able to delegate this to them so that they can take this away from me. But it won't be an immediate, I tell you to do it and you just do it situation. The moving along from low competence to high competence, someone might have the skills, but then still be very low confidence. In that situation, what you need to do is actually invest a lot more time in supporting them. So you don't necessarily need to go through every single instruction, but you need to tell them what you want them to do, and then create a little bit of space and time to ask them, okay, how do you feel about doing that? Do you have any questions? I think you're great and you've got this for these reasons. And it's there a bit more about actually boosting their confidence rather than going into the mundane detail of how they need to do it. Conversely, if their competence is low, but their confidence is high, which I think sometimes we end up in situations where people are maybe more confident than they have the skills, then it's moving away and focusing more on having those touch points and checking in with them as they're doing the activity, so that you can spot where they start to go wrong a bit earlier on. Because their confidence is high, they will not respond well to you being too instructive. So there, it's just making sure you've set them up, you've told them what you want, and then as they go, checking in, you know, once a week, or it depends on how long the activity is, just a little bit of times to just see, okay, how far have you gone? How are you getting on? Brilliant. here's a small correction, keep going. And it's less time intensive upfront, but you probably end up sending the same amount of time as directing overall. And then the sweet spot where we'd love everyone to end up getting to is in the high competence, high confidence. And that's where, rather than having to spend time on the delegation, you can just give an activity to them. And then you're creating time to check in with them every couple of weeks or a month just to see how they're getting on. And the reason I've sort of laid this out is because in moving from a person who has to fix everything to someone who's setting other people up for success and delegating, we often underappreciate the fact that that does take time. And so hopefully finding this means that you can get the timings right and you can build that into your schedule. But I guess the point I just want to make is don't assume delegation means it's completely off your plate. It's still something that you'll need to check in on at the appropriate level, depending on the team member, both confidence and their competence. So a couple of questions to ask if you're trying to move over into this delegative multiplier mode is to think about firstly accepting that it's good to hand things over. So rather than starting with can they do it perfectly, start to think about how could they do it, and is there something I can do that starts to build either their skills or confidence in this area so that I could start handing things over and shifting this into other team members, and then setting yourself up and them up by picking the right way of supporting them to do that activity well. So we've talked now about how to kind of manage yourself internally when there's uncertainty. Do you then some strategies for thinking more broadly about how you bring your team along to navigate through a storm?
Flora, I'm not sure about anyone else, but you've just gone all of a sudden quiet for me. Has it happened to anyone else?
Can everyone still hear me? Oh.
Yes.
Has my sound completely gone out, or can you hear me now?
It's okay. It might have just been at my end.
Apologies. So coming back to it, so we've talked about how to create a sense of calm when you're in the storm, and I'll just lean in a bit more. Hopefully that's a bit better for everyone. Oh, okay. Still hearing. Let me.
Yeah, something just crackled and it sounded louder. So whatever you just touched seemed to move something around. Just try now, Flora.
Is that better?
Speak a bit more so we can.
So now, can people hear me?
That seems better for me. It's a little crackly, so it might be like cables or connection or something, but it seems to be better. Yeah, there we go. That sounds better.
Apologies, everyone. I mentioned to Vic, I literally just moved house on Wednesday, and so my setup isn't perfect. So I will speak very loudly. If I overcompensate and now I'm yelling, let me know, but I'll speak at this volume now for the rest of the session.
The sound quality sounds better as well, so I think you're all right.
Perfect. Brilliant. So, as I was saying, we've kind of talked about how we get through creating a sense of calm when we're in the storm, then how we can start to take back control through our navigation, through some strategies of bringing the team along with us. The final thing I want to talk about is the aspect that I think we often overlook is around how our values can anchor us even when everything feels like it's going wrong and we feel like we're under a lot of pressure. And so I think it's really important when we're in those situations that we recognize that it's in times of crises that we most show who we are and how we are as people. Crises can often really disconnect us from our sense of identity and make us feel like we just have to be the person who just gets things done. It doesn't matter how, we just have to get through it. And it's really, leadership is about how you show up even when everything's going wrong. And so this is where I find it very important that we reconnect with our values and our integrity as leaders so that we remain who we are rather than become the leader the situation's pushing us to be. And so this is where I'd recommend kind of taking that time during your reflection time to ask yourself, what kind of leader do I want to be even when I'm under pressure? What are the values? How do I want people to experience working with me even in this situation? And this is, again, if you are doing any coaching, this is something a coach can help with, but it's also something you personally can spend a little bit of time. There's wonderful lists out there of sort of values that you can look up, that you can look through and feel which ones resonate with you and who you are as a person. And I find it really helpful whenever I've been leading to have that actually printed out and next to my screen in a work environment. So whenever I feel that sort of pressure and overwhelm rising, it's something I look at that grounds me and makes me think, okay, how do I respond with integrity in this moment, or honesty, or any of the words that you find are the ones that kind of come alive and act as an anchor for you. As part of that, I also want to make sure that we focus on making our leadership style sustainable for ourselves. And this is making sure that when we're in a crisis, we often end up compromising ourselves by working too much or ignoring our well-being, over-functioning, and we keep telling ourselves the same lie that it's necessary and we'll just do this until this thing is over. But as we kind of explored in the spiral at the start, when we get in that mindset, there's just another thing, and it piles up and it exhausts us. And so if you feel like your leadership approach is draining you, isolating you, violating your boundaries, that is not sustainable. And it's really important that we recognize sustainability isn't just about the organization, it's also about you. And there is a wonderful quote that Liz Pepler said in a recent conference where I heard her speaking, is that it is not, you cannot build organizational resilience at the expense of individual resilience. And this applies to you and it applies to your team. And it's really important that you use those values that we talked about as an anchor to define for yourself what is enough, what is healthy, and what is non-negotiable for you. And doing this means that you can set yourself up for success and you set the organization up for success. Because if you are doing things that are harming you, it means that it will detract from your ability to lead. It will set an example to your team that that's what everyone should be doing. And it sets up false expectations again for the charity of what is reasonable to expect. And so like we were saying earlier with the trustees, of if we don't put those boundaries up, trustees can think, oh, we can just add more things to that plate. We can just ask more, we can demand more. They're doing fine, they're keeping up with it. And they won't realize, or funders or whoever around us, stakeholders, that they're asking too much. So it's important that we are honest about this and that we recognize the limitations that we have and that our organization therefore has through ourselves and our teams. And so again, this is a really difficult one to say, and I putting it through from a person who absolutely did burn out and ended up in hospital from burnout as a small charity leader. So I'm not saying this lightly, but it is very important that in our reflection we are honest with ourselves. We establish those boundaries and then we start pushing back and bringing those boundaries into work so that the stuff we commit to are things that we can do, and we live in that environment where we are not expecting anyone to harm themselves as a result of their work. Sorry, that's brought up an emotional response for myself, so apologies for that. Moving on, finally, moving on to holding integrity in decisions. Again, this kind of builds on what we've said before of when we're very reactive, we can just act without necessarily thinking about the consequences. And so what I want to highlight is that importance that we remain anchored in our values and in our integrity as leaders, so that we recognize we can take that time to really make sure that we check in on the decisions that we're making so that we can stand by them. Even if we don't love the options we have, we choose how we respond. And so here are some questions that I recommend asking as you're making some of those tough choices of, does this decision align with our organizational values? Or what would a values aligned response look like here? So again, we feel like we have that ownership and that control, that we stand by what we say, even if the decision is tough. And the final point, kind of bringing it all together, is the importance of recognizing that the way we lead sets the example for our team, our board, our volunteers, our stakeholders. everyone is watching, not saying from a judgmental point of view, but from a point of view of what does leadership look like here? And so if you create that space where you are anchored with your values, you try to create that intentional calm in your decision making, it then gives permission to everyone else around you to do that. It creates a sense of trust, a sense of safety, and a sense that even in hard times, we are still ourselves. And this really gives everyone a chance to stay hopeful, engaged, and committed, even when there's chaos around us, and even when things feel like they're going wrong. And this is really the heart of organizational resilience. It's not the structures and systems, it's a culture that reflects what we truly stand for. And while we can't control the storm around us, we can control how we sail through it ourselves. So that's my final thing that I wanted to bring up. So I just wanted to check in with the final poll, Vic, if that's okay, to just see if there's a thing that you've taken from today that you're going to plan to try or put in place after the session. And the options are protecting time for reflection, defining good enough, trying scenario planning or experiments, revisiting how we make value-based decisions, creating more psychological safety, something else if you feel comfortable sharing it in the chat. So we'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and then I'll pause for some Q&A and some final questions or reflections anyone feels comfortable sharing. So the responses are flooding in. I think if we just give it another 10 seconds, Vic, for the final couple of people, if they feel comfortable posting.
Will do. I think because I launched it, I'm not allowed to vote, but mine is definitely the good enough for now. That's really powerful, I think. Right, I'm going to... Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results.
Brilliant. Well, it seems like a large number agree with you as well, because the key thing to take away is defining good enough for now, protecting time for reflection, and then a couple of people have been interested in trying out scenario planning and experiments, and also revisiting how to make values-based decisions and psychological safety. So thank you everyone so much for sharing. I'll take that away now. And it's really encouraging to see that things are resonating. And I just want to, again, give everyone permission to only pick one little thing. So not feeling the pressure of having to put all of these things in place, but just having a small shift, one small habit, one small conversation, little thing that you try and take away, and recognize the ripple effect that that will then have. You don't need to get it right immediately. It's just trying, returning to it, and doing things with intention. So I will pause there just to check in with anyone if they have any reflections or any questions anyone wants to ask, and then we'll wrap up, making sure that we're definitely not past 2 o'clock.
If anyone does have a question, you can ask that in the chat, or you can send a direct message to me so that the question is anonymous and I can put that to Flora. I'm just reading some of the comments in the chat now. Bernice saying, I feel calmer just having taken some time to do this session. Well, that's a nice way to end the week, definitely. And lots of thank yous. I think a reflection from me, Flora, firstly, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, and never apologize for the rush of emotion that can come with sharing your own personal experience. I think one of the reasons this session in particular is so powerful coming from you is that you are a former small charity leader and you have completely lived and breathed and walked this walk. So appreciate you sharing that with us. I think something that I really struggle with that others might relate to is just changing the habits that I have had for the last nearly 40 years, and kind of how do I break the habit? So I wonder, a question to you, I guess a reflection as well, and a question to you is, have you found anything especially helpful in just like breaking those really ingrained habits and just taking that very first step on the ladder of being able to manage this a bit better?
That's a really great question. I think there's a few things there. Firstly, I think is the psychological aspect of it takes about 3 months to 6 months to develop a new habit, especially if it's something that's deeply ingrained. So the first thing I always recommend to people is to be kind and recognize it's going to take time. Often we come to something like this and we go, right, today I'm a new person. And that's brilliant. Use that energy. But also be kind to yourself to recognize it will take 3 months, it will take 6 months to have that change. So if you don't do the habit then, one time or a couple of times, not to then beat yourself up and say, oh, well, I guess I can't change. And recognize that we will go back to old habits, especially when things get tough. That's okay. The point is to keep trying and to keep working at it. The other thing that I found, especially in coaching, that people seem to just really works is if you start thinking of yourself as a person who does that. So one person that I was speaking to wanted to go to the gym more. Just a very simple example, a non-confidential example. And so she decided, I am, and I'll make up a name, Melissa, and I go to the gym. And even on the week she couldn't go to the gym because she had childcare or something came up, her sense of identity was still, I am a person who goes to the gym. And so she could adapt to the situations around her. But then when she had the opportunity, she came back to the habit. And that was a really empowering way of sticking with it. And then the final thing I will say is take it slow. So if there's a big change you want to make, say, okay, this week I'll do it 1 time. Next week I'll do it 2 times. The week after I'll do it 3 times. And again, build in those little bits of success and celebrate yourself for making a small change that then over time becomes a bigger change. So there's a great analogy. Again, I'm sticking with ships because it's the theme of the presentation of, if you think of like a big tanker ship, when they're steering, they steer by sort of a degree or a percentage of a degree. And if you do that, if you set out from England and you start sailing and you start making a 1% change, you can end up either in South America, you can end up in Africa, you can end up in Antarctica. So the tiny 1% degree shifts can make a huge impact on where you end up. So again, don't expect to be at the destination, but make your little course corrections as you go.
Very wise words. Thanks, Flora. I'm just reading a couple of things that have come through from the chat. Lisa sharing, I think it's really hard in this sector to take a step back and remain calm when you see that the need and you're frustrated that you can't support everyone 100%, and particularly in small charities where we are very close to the front line of service delivery and where there's a lot of emotional connection there. Yeah, you might also like a session that we did this morning, which will be available to hopefully everyone who's had a ticket today, that's about kind of staying joyful in your activism. So we'll be sharing some information on that as well. And Gemma saying, I always find it helpful to say to myself that I'm doing the best I can, and that's what we're all doing, and that's good enough. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, unless anybody else has any other questions or reflections that they might like to bring, I'll just say a massive thank you to Flora for being here, and a massive thank you to you all. Like I said at the beginning, we know that time is one of your most precious resources. And so you should all give yourselves a pat on the back for being here as well. You've taken an hour out of your, I'm sure, very busy schedules. And maybe this is that first step on the ladder for some of you in trying to develop some of these more healthy habits. Maybe we can have some like accountability buddy going on, Flora, with the Fair Collective Associates. I think I definitely need it. But yeah, I've definitely taken a lot from this myself today. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Friday, everyone, and have a great weekend when it comes. Massive thank you again, Flora, and to our sponsors, Charity People. And I'll see you all very soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great rest of your day.
Take care. Thanks, everyone. Bye.